Welcome to the wonderful world of wine. We are your hosts, Mark Lindsay and Kim Simone, and we are exploring all things wine with you. You can find us on Facebook at The Wonderful World of Wine. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the wonderful world of wine. Every week, we join you to discuss trending topics in the wine world, whether we are all together or we are in isolation. And as we've been doing for the last few weeks, Mark and I are not next to each other in our recording studio. We are in our separate spots, but it's always nice to get together every week to kind of sort of see you, Mark. So how are you?
How are you, Kim? It's always good to talk wine, and especially nowadays, let's talk about some good things, and nothing better than talking wine.
We love talking wine.
So what did you find today, Kim?
So today, kind of following up on what we were talking about last week, I wanted to do a little bit for our listeners about how they can enjoy wine in their own home environments. We're not going out to restaurants at the moment. So what can you do around your house to make your wine taste just a little bit better? So we've got 9 genius wine hacks worth trying at home from an Australian website called BHG. So there are some fun things in here, some things that I was aware of, but that could be really, really useful for wine consumers at home. What did you find was the most interesting or something different on here, Mark, that you hadn't seen before?
Well, one of them was talking about removing red wine stains. Mm-hmm. This was something you always see hacks on your clothing, this and that, and they were saying use salt to remove a red wine stain. Kim, have you ever heard of that hack?
I had not heard this one before. So the idea is, say you spill red wine on your carpet or on an article of clothing that you're wearing, blot it so that you get as much of the liquid out as possible, and then take salt and cover the stain in salt and let it sit for 45 minutes. And then you're supposed to press the salt out of your clothing with a towel that has been soaked in boiling hot water. And that apparently is supposed to take out the stain. So I might need to try that because I haven't tried that before.
Yeah, I never heard of this one. And I thought it sounds like a good tip, Kim. One of the things I've always looked for in a hack in wine stains is how to get it off my countertop. My wife is going to kill me if I put another stain. I'm always pouring wine. It gets on my countertop. And next day I forget it or something. The next day there's a big ring or a drop. And no matter how big that drop is, my wife finds it and I cannot remove it. So if anyone knows that hack, that's the one I need.
Do you want to know what I use to get it out of my...
Please.
So I use a product called Barkeeper's Friend. Do you have any of that?
No.
It's awesome.
Is it bleach?
It's really good. I don't know what it is, but it's used for like stainless steel things, but it's great on countertops.
What kind of countertop? Do you have granite?
No, I have like a cheap Formica countertop.
All right. I knew I liked you, Kim. Yeah.
I have nothing fancy. Butcher block is about as fancy as we get around here.
I don't think granite even soaks up wine as much as our countertops do, but
I bet if you reached out to someone who like works at a countertop or a stone fab place, I bet they've got some good advice.
Well, I have to try that.
There you go.
What about you? What did you find interesting on the list?
So I liked this idea of how to chill down a bottle of wine very quickly. Now, usually what I do if I have a bottle of wine that is room temperature and I want it to be cold, if I have enough ice on hand, I'll put it in an ice water bath. But this idea is you take a paper towel and you get the paper towel wet, and then you wrap the wet paper towel around your bottle of wine, and then you put it in the freezer. And so the idea is that the water in the paper towel will freeze rapidly, and then that will chill down your wine. So this works in the same manner as a chill sleeve, which I have a few of and that I use fairly religiously. And it creates a different layer of really, really, really cold up against your bottle of wine. And it pulls the room temperature out of your wine and makes it cold really fast. So I think that is a great hack for chilling down wine that you want it to be a little bit colder than it actually is. So it's the paper towel. So
the paper towel must stick, right, Kim?
You're creating like an ice layer in the paper towel, and it sticks to your bottle.
I mean, it freezes to the bottle. It's got to, when you take it out of there, it's got to be stuck, right?
Well,
must freeze right
yeah,
now.
but then that's going to come up to less than 32, I mean, more than 32 degrees pretty quickly when you take it out of the freezer. So give it a minute.
Yeah,
I'm
I,
sure.
I just put it in the fridge. 20 minutes, take it out.
Yeah, me too.
That's my, and that's related to one
So
of the
they,
other items they said too about putting wines in the fridge, which I didn't understand. Why is that a hack?
for
I guess you
storage,
leftover wines, right? Is
right?
what they're saying.
Well, because I think that people don't naturally think to put leftover wine in the refrigerator if it's red wine. And this is something that I always do. So if you have an open bottle of wine, whether it's red or white, it's going to last longer if you put it in the refrigerator. That just sort of slows down the oxidation and slows down the aging of the wine. But I don't think that it's something naturally that people would think about doing, especially for a bottle of red wine.
Yeah,
So
I
do
never
it.
used to do this. I
Yeah.
never used to do this, and then I noticed. Why don't you explain, Kim? Let's explain to the listeners. You open a red wine the next day. If you did not take it from your counter and put it in the fridge, what do you notice on the taste profile of the wine?
So usually for red wines, what will happen is the flavors will certainly start to change. I mean, it will for whites too, but for reds, you lose a lot of that primary like red berry fruit. It's not going to smell and taste quite as fresh. It's going to start to take on sometimes some nutty flavors. Sometimes the flavors and the aromas will start to dull a little bit. For better wines, they may even be tasting better the next day. They just tend to soften. The tannins will soften up a little bit. Sometimes the acidity is different as well. So your wines do change over time. They're a living, breathing organism, we can say. So any exposure to oxygen over any length of time is definitely going to change the flavor of that bottle of wine.
I find that too. I think it's mostly associated with the fruits. It really kills that fresh fruit and maybe it gets a little more acidic, shines through a little bit more.
Yep.
But sometimes I see that the aroma maybe opens up more because it's warmer, but not
Sure.
necessarily a good thing when you're tasting it and you're losing that fresh fruit. So
Right. And
I've
even
been doing
that
that
difference
more.
of like 10 degrees in your kitchen, like if you have the difference between, a 64-degree room and a 74-degree room, your wine, if it's at that warmer temperature, is going to smell and taste a lot different than if it was a little bit on the cooler side. So even just that little bit, and especially as we're coming into summertime and, indoor temperatures are going to start to go up a little bit, you're going to see if you have an open bottle of wine that it's going to be very different at a cooler temperature than at a warmer temperature.
And related to leftover wine, Kim, there was another thing on this hack list that said keep your leftover wine in half-size bottles.
I really like this idea, but I don't think that a lot of people have small bottles.
No, and I was thinking, well, first off, the reason you want to put it in a smaller bottle is because once you reduce that volume, the rest of the bottle is filling up with air and that is eating away at the wine. So the smaller bottle transfer, now you have less air that can combat the wine and ruin it. So then I was thinking, okay, you're right. How do you find these half-size bottles? The wineries do make half-size wine bottles, but it's not very common to find them on your retail shelves. But you can find, and I know you're a fan of this, like oils or vinegar half-size bottles. You could wash those out and you could use those. So I
Sure.
think that's kind of a great little hack.
And usually they have like great little cork stoppers that they'll be, plastic, but then there'll be a little bit of a cork that goes in the bottle. And that makes for a really great airtight seal. I reuse those sorts of bottles for things all the time. Maybe you put a big thing of vinegar that you buy at Costco and you put it into a smaller bottle to keep it in your pantry because it's a little bit easier to maneuver than, 2 gallons of whatever. And that absolutely can work with wine. Sure.
That's a good point because they mentioned to transfer it to a small bottle, but it didn't really focus on, you still got to remember you have to seal that half-size bottle to keep it,
So that seal.
keep the
And
air out.
you know what? Screw caps would be the best, or, any other thing that you have around, kicking around your house that's going to give a really nice tight seal. If you are a beer, a home brewer, if you make beer at home and you have cappers for putting on beer caps, that's also a great way to recork things. I know I've done that in a pinch from time to time, but I'm weird. I've got those things kicking around my house.
I'm glad you said you're weird.
You say it all the time.
Yeah. So one of the other things I saw on the list, Kim, I had to ask you about. There was a hack, and it said, swirl your wines, but not your bubbles. And you being the bubbly queen, I know I swirl everything that's in my glass. Do you swirl sparkling wine?
I swirl my bubbles only at the very, very beginning. only to get that first or second initial hit of the aromas will I swirl it. So right after it goes in my glass, I'll give it a little bit of a little bit of a smell. Maybe I'll swirl it around a little bit and give it another smell. But then that's the extent of my swirling. Because I really do like those bubbles. But on the flip side of that, I also want to get the aromas out of my glass of sparkling wine. So this kind of goes back to the whole idea of, well, what are we even serving our sparkling wine in? Do we want to serve it in a flute? Do we want to serve it in a regular glass? Do we want to serve it in one of those old-fashioned coupe glasses? It's this balance between retaining the integrity of the bubble and also being able to get all those lovely, beautiful aromas out of the wine. So it's kind of a balancing act, I feel like, when it comes to bubbles, because those two things on either side of the spectrum, you want them both, and you kind of need to reach something in the middle where you have a little bit of both, but you're not losing the aromas, but you're not losing the bubbles either.
So if you put your sparkling wine in a flute or a coupe, a smaller glass, there's no way you're going to swirl it.
No, you can't swirl
right?
it in a flute. No, just doesn't happen.
I was thinking when I saw this, first I wanted to ask you if you do it, and the second thing was they're saying don't swirl it because you'll kill the bubbles. So for me, when I get a sparkling, first thing I do is I look at the bubbles, then I swirl it. To me, after you see the bubbles the first time, it doesn't matter to me that I lose that fizz if I'm swirling it around, because it's all about the aromatics. I'm kind of want to get more aromatics out of it.
So you're less about the texture of the bubble. See, I want that bubbliness to continue as I consume that glass of wine.
Do you notice that the bubbles really are harmed when you swirl it?
If I swirl it a lot, yeah.
Yeah. Sometimes initially it foams up more. When you first pop in it, it's very carbonated and it can actually foam a little more,
And I'm one of those obsessive swirlers. I'll keep swirling my glass of wine without even realizing that I'm doing it. So if I'm having, a glass of cava or a glass of something in a regular wine glass instead of in a flute, I actually have to be very careful that I don't continue to swirl that wine. So even if I'm drinking a low spritz or some sort of cocktail that has bubbly in it, and if it's served in a wine glass, I got to be careful that I, just don't let my hands just do what they want to do and keep swirling that wine. It's like, no, stop swirling. Don't swirl the glass.
Yeah, it's a habit.
Leave it alone.
I do it with milk and soda.
I do it with my coffee. Yeah. But hey, it keeps the sugar stirred in.
It was funny. I was listening to some podcast the other day, and the master of wine said, I swirl my wines counterclockwise. And then I'm thinking, geez, I don't remember if I do counter or clockwise. I didn't even think about it. I just swirl it, right?
I do counterclockwise.
So then, I think everybody swirls.
Well, if you're a right, I'm a righty. So
if you're lefty,
that's how I do. I would be interested to hear from lefties on how they swirl their wine. I should ask some of my colleagues.
I'm simulating it now, and
totally counterclockwise.
Yeah. It is. It's left versus right-handed. Yeah.
I want you all to try this. I want all of our listeners to pay attention to what direction they swirl their wine.
Talk about geeky, huh?
I'm going to go ask my husband.
Counterclockwise swirlers.
Oh,
sounds awesome. Like a T-shirt to me.
I should ask my mother because she's a lefty, and my father-in-law too.
We'll research more.
Absolutely.
What about a couple other? There was talk about using a vase as a decanter.
Yeah, so we're talking about decanters. So if you don't have a decanter at home and you really want to decant your wine, you can use a flower vase or two. Make sure they're nice and clean. Even if you have a really large, mason jar, that could be fine too. One into the other, and then pour it in either back into the bottle if you have a funnel, or you could just pour your wine from that mason jar. Just make sure all your stuff is clean. We're doing the best we can here, and we're using the stuff that we have around us. So people certainly can get creative.
I like this hack based on a cost perspective, Kim.
Sure.
Because if you look at these decanters that they sell, they're pretty extravagant. Crystal
ones that
hundreds
are
of dollars.
Yeah, very expensive.
Yeah, not only can you not clean them, but they're going to break like nothing if you try.
And then you need special tools in order to clean them correctly.
Yeah, so a more industrial flower vase or a mason jar. I like the idea. And then they related it. There was another hack related to decanting, which also said do it. It said multiple jars. So you decant it in one jar, and then you decant it in another jar. But the second jar, you pour it back and forth and back and forth. So you're decanting multiple times in the second jar. And then you compare the taste in the two. The one you just poured and decanted once, and the one you decanted many times.
See, I can totally see you doing this because you really like aerating your wine.
Yeah, I'm not
Yeah.
sure. I was thinking, is this really a hack? I mean, it's just that's how you decant, right? I mean,
Right. But
multiple
it's using
times.
things that you already have at home as opposed to going out and getting
Yeah,
something different and
I'll
special.
tell you a really good hack I like with decanters, especially if you have like a box wine, it's hanging around. Say you have a
Mm-hmm.
Cabernet, you take some M&Ms and you put them in the jar, swirl the M&Ms in there, then you dump the M&Ms, you put the wine in it and swirl the wine in it. Add a little chocolate aroma and flavor to your wine. Beefs it up a little bit.
Are you serious?
Yeah, I'm serious. You can add things into the decanter to enhance the wine a little bit.
So if I want my Chardonnay to be a little more appley, I could throw a little apple in the
Little
decanter
apple
first.
chunks in there, flip it around, or apple juice or
Oh,
something
then I'm
like
just
that.
making sangria.
Yeah, well, a non technical sangria. So
Mm.
yeah, something different. What was there was two more hacks they were saying, Kim. One was take photos of your wines that you like.
This isn't a hack. This is something I recommend all the time. This is a really great way to remember what wines you like. And it's easier than keeping bottles around the house. So, take a photo of a wine that you like, even keep a separate wine folder in your photos folder on your phone. And this makes it really easy when you're ordering wine, when you're buying wine, when you're talking to your favorite retailer about wine, just having all of that visual information, because there's more than you're going to be able to capture in that picture than you're going to remember in your memory. So fantastic way to keep the wines that you like in one place, and then over time you can have this really nice collection of wines that that you've liked, and you can look at them and find some similarities. Maybe you discover that you really like, I don't know, like South American wines, or you really like cool climate Sauvignon Blancs. So as you see some trends, you'll be able to hopefully find some new wines that you'll be able to explore, and new favorites.
Yeah, it's a great memory tool. And like you said, Kim, if you have a separate picture a folder and you go someplace and you said, well, I had this, and they don't have it, at least they have a kind of an idea of what the
Right.
style, what the region that you like.
Yep.
And I'll add a hack to this hack in that don't just take the front label. Don't just take the pretty picture on the front label.
Mm-hmm.
Take that back label. I had a story. I follow this gentleman. He's always posting beautiful bottles of wines that he likes, but he never takes the back label. So first off, I want to see the importer. I want to see details on that back, where it's bottled, things of that nature, which helps me source it out or get more information for it. So always take that back label picture. So you have to take two pictures.
Right. There's a lot of good information on that back label. And you always do this with the labels when you are showing wines that we've either tasted in our wine club, or that you're exploring and we're getting some new things. There's a lot of information on there that can give retailers, give restaurant folks a little bit more information about what you like and how to find something new for you.
Yeah, a lot of good information. And
Yeah.
sometimes, don't forget, they've also put the alcohol on that, hidden on that back label. So if you like a certain style of Chardonnay and you like a certain level of alcohol, if it's always the same, 13.5 that you're drinking, I don't want to recommend you a 14% or a 12% or something like that. I want to keep you in kind of your alcohol range as well.
Mhm.
So
Or for the
that
flip side, if you
helps.
find that you like wines that are like 14 and a half or 15, but that are well balanced, you might not necessarily realize that those are higher in alcohol, but the texture changes when you've got a higher alcohol wine. So you might be more fond of those, richer, fuller, lusher wines that you wouldn't necessarily have the words to put to it, but we can tell by the level of alcohol in there that's the style of wine that you like.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. And
So I
one
think
last
the
hack, Kim.
last hack was
This is
what to
good for
do
you.
with what to do with that leftover wine that you've got like a tiny little bit at the bottom of the bottle. You're not going to finish it. Freeze it into ice cubes and use it for cooking, which is fine. It's not something I've ever done because I never have any wine left over in my house. But when I do, I
See?
turn my wine into vinegar. Um,
Yeah, if
but I've
anyone was going
never,
to do this, it would be
yeah,
you, right?
I've never done that. I don't know. Wine does freeze a little differently than water does, obviously with the alcohol content in there. So it might end up being a little bit more of a slushy cube than an actual hard frozen cube. I do this with orange juice, but I haven't necessarily done it with wine. But I think maybe it's worth a try. I've
Yeah,
got
I
a
was just going to ask you.
little bit of the bottom of a box of wine sitting on my bar, so maybe I should try that.
I wonder what I mean, I've heard you want to do this because then you throw it in a saucepan to make
Yeah.
a
Yeah, if you're going to
base out of
make
it, correct?
right. So it's like if you always keep containers of, chicken broth frozen in your freezer. It's just kind of the same thing.
So you're not freezing it to use it as ice cubes to put in your
Right.
wine,
Right.
right?
Although I can see me doing that too.
Yeah, I was
Mm.
thinking as a hack, you freeze red wine and then you use it as ice cubes in your white wine to make it into like a
New rosé.
rosé.
I've
I wonder
heard
how it would
of
taste.
putting grapes in the freezer, and then you
Yeah,
put your grapes in your white wine to chill it down so it acts like an ice cube, but it doesn't dilute your wine.
yeah, I've heard that too.
You should try
That's
the grape thing.
well, these were good hacks.
Yeah, so when you're stuck at home and you want to up your wine game, these are some things that you can try to make your wine taste a little bit better.
You're listening to The Wonderful World of Wine, and we are your hosts, Mark Lindsay and Kim Simone, exploring all things wine with you. You can find more information on Kim on her website, vinitaswineworks.com, more information about myself at franklinliquors.com, and you can find our past episodes on SoundCloud or iTunes. And welcome back. We're talking wine today. And Kim, there's a story we found about Corks. And it was actually interesting because they had some nice videos of the whole production of how the cork trees are harvested, how corks are made, the whole process. And it blew my mind, Kim, because every time we open a bottle of wine with a cork, this is something you never think about, right? How did that thing get there?
This
What
was
was the
really
process?
cool to watch. I've read about how cork trees are harvested and how cork is made, but I had never actually watched a video of it. And this was really fascinating. I just sat there for a half an hour and I watched these videos about cork. It was pretty cool.
Yeah, so you can easily just YouTube cork harvest, how corks are made, and you'll find a numerous videos. But this one went through the whole step process. The cork trees, mainly Portugal is the king cork tree country, I guess we could say, Kim, right?
Yep.
And they say every 9 years, these trees are stripped of their bark. And it was a very interesting, delicate procedure. Usually two gentlemen or two people are next to the tree and they slice a little ring around and then they just strip the bark off, and they go pretty much all the way up the tree to where the
they go pretty
branches
far.
start.
It reminded me of like shearing sheep.
Yeah,
It's like,
exactly.
every season you take your sheep and you take all the wool off of them and it doesn't hurt the sheep, and they just look naked for a while and then their wool grows back, and that's kind of like what this is. They're stripping the bark off of the tree down to the whatever layer of the tree, then lets it grow back for the next, was it 9 years for this one? I've heard
9
anywhere
years.
from 7 to 12.
In the past, we had mentioned when we talked about cork trees before, I think it takes like 30 or 40 years before the tree can be harvested for the first time.
Yep.
And we were joking that you don't want to own a cork tree farm because you get maybe one harvest and that's it in your lifetime. But so then I was thinking to myself when I saw this, you mentioned when they strip it off, they're like 3 to 4 inches thick, and it actually does look like a cork board, right?
Yeah,
when they
it
take
really
it
does.
off. So
And
I was
then there's
thinking,
all
what an idiot. It is cork, right?
It's cork, yeah. And then there's all of these processing steps that it has to go through. But what struck me is just how like natural it all was. Like they don't, for this type of process of making these types of corks that we looked at, they literally punch a cork shape out of the bark and that's what you have, which was just so like fascinatingly simple to me.
And there were so many interesting steps before that, Kim, where they actually they cut it, they stack it, and then it sits for
They age
1 year.
Yeah,
1
so it's
year.
like firewood. Yeah, so they age it for a while and then they clean it and they cut it down into manageable strips, and then
they boil it to take off
that's
all
right.
the impurities out of it. Then they
And that
cut it
cleans
to
it. Yep.
size to cut the cork out of it, and then they clean it again. And then sometimes they're hand punched or they're hand sorted, and then they grade them. Did you see the pot, Kim?
Yes.
They had like a red, green, and a yellow bin, and the machine either sorts them but for defects into those stages. So I would assume the green are the more expensive corks, and
Mm-hmm.
then the red is just the everyday stuff.
Right. So it goes through a number of steps where either a machine or a person is looking at them for how good quality they are. So, if there are, I guess, lines through them from rot or from insects or whatnot, those will be of a lower grade. But then if they're, clean and they have, good cell structure, then they're technically a better level of cork.
And I also noticed, Kim, when they punch it, the cork, it must shrink through the whole process of by the time it gets to the end, right? Because they looked a lot bigger when they're punched than the final product. But I didn't see.
Because I think there was a drying stage too.
After it's punched?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, I didn't see that part because it definitely looked like either that or they were punching, Magnum or bigger corks or something like that. So
yeah, no, I think there seemed to be a couple of stages of getting them clean or damp and then a drying and then doing that all over again. So
what's your understanding of the average, if I go to a homebrew store or a winemaking store, how much am I going to pay for a cork?
a couple cents.
Yeah, like under 50 cents, right?
Oh gosh, yes. Like usually like
the technology and the labor and everything it takes to make these. And it's amazing that you're paying such a little amount for the cork to me, the process. It's almost like when I think about wine, how we're getting a bottle of wine here from France and it's $10, right? I mean, all that goes through to still pay $10 a bottle. It's
right.
just amazing.
Yeah.
Anything else on corks you think we should mention?
I mean, I've felt like this was a really interesting jumping off point. This showed us how you get the most, I would arguably say the most natural style of cork closure. And I would be interested in seeing, okay, if this is what natural cork production looks like, what does composite cork look like? What does some of those other types of cork that are maybe made from reconstituted cork or ground up cork that have then been put together? So I would be curious to see maybe another video of how other types of cork are made.
Yeah, and I think they're probably taking those rejected or those red ones and they grind that. So
and
they
then
make
like another thing of cleaning that goes through. And how do you make those? So I'd be
what
curious.
You were saying, the non-natural corks, they take like a plastic shell and they fill the center with natural cork to save a little costs, but they're probably using those rejected cork shavings for that.
Well, you don't want to waste any of that stuff. So I would think that there would be other things to be made that would then use that other cork. Maybe those cork boards, are coming from the corks that aren't going into the wine bottles that have been rejected, but now we're going to stick some push pins in them.
And they didn't show about treating them for bacteria and stuff like that, but there's been a lot of talk where these major cork producers have found ways to guarantee there's no bacteria or anything to ruin your wine. So I would assume there's another step that they're doing once it's completed to make sure there's no impurities or anything that's going to grow on there by the time it gets to the
unless
winery.
There's something in that initial washing step that's not just hot boiling water, but is some sort of antifungal.
Something else in there.
Yeah.
Well, it's an interesting process. But have you ever you've been to Portugal, correct?
No,
Spain. You were Spain, right?
Well, we didn't actually go.
Oh, I thought you were there before when you were in Italy that time.
No, I've never been to Spain or Portugal. No.
So that's kind of a thing on my list now. I want to see these cork trees, and I wonder if they would grow in our region.
I don't know.
It's like I can't go to Home Depot and get a cork tree.
Can't buy a cork tree. Yeah.
But I kind of want to. I won't live long enough to get the bark off it, though. Jeez.
Well, it's just a different type of oak, so I don't see why it wouldn't grow here. But specific terroir in Portugal, it makes it perfect for wine bottles.
And where else have you heard in the world, Kim, that harvest?
Spain grows a little bit of it, but I don't really know anywhere else that does grow cork oak.
I mean, Portugal's kind of it has the monopoly on the
really
cork
does.
industry, because all these companies, they're from Portugal, and you don't hear anything else.
No,
it's too late to get into it now.
Too late for you.
Yeah, too late for us. We can't do it.
Thank you for joining us today for the wonderful world of wine. As always, it is a pleasure to discuss topics in the wine world with you. We've been your hosts, Mark and Kim. You can find us on Facebook at The Wonderful World of Wine. And for past episodes, you can find us on SoundCloud and iTunes. Cheers.